I-35M never thought I'd be posting here, but here goes. My wife, Rebecca, 33F, and I have been married for 8 years. We met in college, and it was love at first sight, or so I thought. The first few years were bliss. Great sex life, lots of romance and adventure. We were that annoyingly perfect couple, always showing affection and finishing each other's sentences. Everyone said we were relationship goals. But then, around year 5, things started to change. Rebecca became more distant. She was always working late and going on girls' trips. Sex dwindled to once a month if I was lucky. When I tried to talk to her about it, she'd snap at me and say I was being needy and insecure. Still, I never suspected she was cheating. Call me naive, but I trusted her completely. I chalked it up to a rough patch that all couples go through. Boy, was I wrong. It all came to a head last weekend at our friend Sandy's wedding. Rebecca was acting strange all day, barely talking to me, constantly on her phone, disappearing for long stretches. I figured she was just stressed from being a bridesmaid. Little did I know the real reason was her secret lover was at the wedding, too. So there I was, sitting alone at my table, nursing my 3rd whiskey, when Sandy came over to check on me. "Hey, have you seen Rebecca?" she asked, looking concerned. "I need her for photos." I shrugged. "No idea. Last I saw, she was headed to the bathroom." Sandy frowned. "That was almost an hour ago. I've checked all the bathrooms. She's not there." A sinking feeling started to form in my gut. I downed the rest of my drink and stood up. "I'll find her." I started searching the reception hall, trying to think of where she might be. The dance floor? Nope. The bar? No sign of her. I was about to give up when I noticed a side door slightly ajar, leading to a dimly lit hallway. My heart pounding, I crept towards the door, not sure what I'd find, but knowing it wouldn't be good. As I got closer, I heard muffled voices. One of them was definitely Rebecca's. I inched the door open, holding my breath. There, pressed up against the wall, was my wife, her bridesmaid dress hiked up around her waist. And there, with his pants around his ankles, was the best man, grunting as he thrust into her. They were so lost in their forbidden tryst, they didn't even notice me at first. It wasn't until Rebecca's moans reached a crescendo that her eyes fluttered open and met mine. She gasped, shoving her lover away. "Oh my God, John, this isn't what it looks like!" But it was exactly what it looked like. And from the guilt in her eyes, she knew she'd been caught red-handed. I stood there frozen as Rebecca hastily adjusted her dress, and the best man, who I now recognized as her work friend Dave, fumbled with his zipper. My shock quickly turned to rage. "Are you fucking kidding me, Rebecca?" I seethed, my voice shaking. "At our best friend's wedding, with this asshole?" Rebecca had the audacity to look offended. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "You're causing a scene." "I'm causing a scene?" I laughed humorlessly. "That's rich, coming from the woman who was just getting railed in a public hallway." Dave, to his credit, looked thoroughly ashamed. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. "I'm so sorry, man," he mumbled. "We never meant for you to find out like this." "Oh, you're sorry?" I turned on him. "Well, as long as you're sorry, I guess it's all okay then. No harm done, right? Just my entire marriage down the fucking drain." Rebecca stepped between us, glaring at me. "Don't you dare blame this on him," she warned. "If you hadn't been so distant, so wrapped up in your own shit, maybe I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere for attention." I gaped at her, astounded by the mental gymnastics. "You can't be serious. You're really going to spin this as my fault? For what exactly? Not being psychic enough to know my wife was a lying, cheating "Shut up!" she snapped, eyes darting nervously to the reception hall. "Just shut up, John. We can talk about this later in private. Don't ruin Sandy's big day." "It's a little late for that, don't you think?" I gestured between the two of them in disgust. "You've already ruined everything." Unable to even look at her anymore, I stormed out of the hallway, desperately needing air, space, anything to process the implosion of my world. I don't remember leaving the wedding venue. I don't remember getting in my car or driving home. It's all a blur, a haze of anger and heartache and betrayal. I found myself sitting on our couch, in the dark, a bottle of whiskey in my hand. The same couch where, just a week ago, Rebecca and I had cuddled up to watch a movie, blissfully unaware that our marriage was a sham. How could she do this to me? To us? I thought we were happy. I thought we were in love. Had it all been a lie? How long had this been going on? Was Dave the only one? The questions swirled in my mind, taunting me, mocking me for being so blind, so trusting. I took a long swig from the bottle, relishing the burn in my throat. Physical pain to numb the emotional anguish. I don't know how long I sat there, drowning in self-pity and alcohol, before I heard the front door open. Rebecca. I braced myself for round two. She walked into the living room cautiously, as if approaching a wild animal. John? Her voice was small, tentative. Can we talk? I laughed bitterly. Oh, now you want to talk? You didn't seem too keen on talking back at the wedding. She sighed, sitting down on the opposite end of the couch. I'm sorry, okay? I panicked. I never wanted you to find out like that. But you wanted me to find out eventually? I asked incredulously. Was that your plan? String me along until you got bored of your boy toy? It's not like that, she said, but she couldn't look me in the eye. It was a mistake. A stupid, stupid mistake. It won't happen again, I swear. I shook my head, taking another swig. I don't believe you. I can't trust anything you say anymore. Our entire marriage, our love, it was all built on lies. Rebecca started to cry then, big crocodile tears. That's not true. I do love you, John. This thing with Dave, it didn't mean anything. It was just sex. Just sex. As if that made it any better. As if that could erase the image of them together seared into my brain. I think you should go, I said, suddenly exhausted. I can't do this right now. I can't even look at you. Sniffling, she nodded, getting up from the couch. I'll give you some space. But this isn't over, John. We can get through this. We have to. As she walked out, closing the door softly behind her, I had a sinking feeling that it was over. That there was no coming back from this. Trust is like a mirror. You can fix it if it's broken, but you can still see the crack in that motherfucker's reflection. And right now, all I saw in our reflection was shattered glass. The next few days passed in a drunken stupor. I called out sick from work, unable to face the world, unable to face myself. Rebecca tried to call and text, but I ignored her. I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't ready to make any decisions. On the fourth day, there was a knock at the door. I almost didn't answer it, but the knocking persisted, insistent. Groaning, I hauled myself off the couch and stumbled to the door, squinting at the bright sunlight as I opened it. It was Sandy. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern, taking in my disheveled appearance and bloodshot eyes. Oh, John, she sighed. I'm so sorry. I stepped aside wordlessly, letting her in. She surveyed the living room, taking note of the empty whiskey bottles and takeout containers littering the coffee table. I tried to stop her, Sandy said softly, perching on the arm of the couch, when I saw her sneaking off with Dave at the reception. I told her she was making a huge mistake, that she'd regret it. I looked at her sharply. You knew about the affair? Sandy bit her lip, nodding guiltily. I had my suspicions. The late nights, the secret phone calls. I confronted her about it a month ago, but she denied everything. Said I was being paranoid. I felt a fresh wave of anger and hurt crash over me. Not only had my wife betrayed me, but my best friend had kept it from me. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded. If you knew, why didn't you say anything? I wanted to, Sandy said, her eyes welling with tears. Believe me, I did. But I didn't have proof. And Rebecca, she made me promise not to say anything. She said they'd ended it, that it was a one-time mistake. I wanted to believe her. I laughed humorlessly. Well, I guess we both fell for her lies. Sandy reached out, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. You didn't deserve this, John. No one deserves this. But you can't let it destroy you. You have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and decide what you want. What I want? I echoed bitterly. I want my wife back. I want my life back. But that's never going to happen, is it? No, Sandy agreed quietly. It's not. But you have a choice now, John. You can either let this define you, let it ruin you, or you can rise above it. Show Rebecca and yourself that you're stronger than her mistakes. I mulled over her words, the fog of alcohol and self-pity starting to lift slightly. She was right. As much as I wanted to wallow, to drown my sorrows in whiskey and what-ifs, I knew it wouldn't change anything. Rebecca had made her choice. Now I had to make mine. I think, I said slowly, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. I think I want a divorce. Saying the words out loud made it real. Divorce. The end of my marriage, the end of everything I'd built my life around for the past 8 years. It was terrifying. But it was also strangely liberating. For the first time since I'd caught Rebecca cheating, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. I felt hope. Sandy hugged me fiercely, proud and sad and supportive all at once. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me. "I know it's hard, but you'll get through this. You're one of the strongest people I know." I wish I had her confidence. But I knew the first step was the hardest, and I'd just taken it. Now I had to follow through. I spent the next day looking up divorce lawyers, trying to wrap my head around the logistics of untangling our lives. We'd need to split our assets, our bank accounts, decide who got the house, the car. It was overwhelming, but I forced myself to take it one step at a time. When Rebecca came home that evening, I was waiting for her at the kitchen table, printouts of divorce attorneys spread out in front of me. She froze when she saw them, her face cycling through a myriad of emotions: shock, guilt, anger, fear. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "John, what are you doing?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm filing for divorce, Rebecca." She stared at me aghast. "Divorce? No, John, we can work this out. We can go to therapy. We can what?" I cut her off, my voice hard. "Pretend like it never happened? Pretend like you didn't shatter every ounce of trust I had in you? I can't do that, Rebecca. I won't." "So that's it then?" she asked, tears spilling down her cheeks. 8 years of marriage and you're ready to just throw it all away?" I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "I'm not the one who threw it away, Rebecca. You did that the moment you decided to fuck another man." She flinched at my crude language, but I was past caring, past sparing her feelings. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "I still love you, John. Doesn't that count for anything?" For a moment I wavered. A part of me longed to believe her, to fall into her arms and let her convince me we could move past this. But a bigger part, the part that was still raw and bleeding, knew better. "I love you too, Rebecca," I said, my voice cracking. "I probably always will. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the hurt is too deep, the trust too broken. And that's where we are now." She nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, if that's what you want, then I won't fight you on it. I'll move out this weekend." "Thank you," I said stiffly, hating how formal and cold we'd become. Strangers negotiating the end of a life together. As she turned to leave, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The woman I'd thought would be by my side forever. And for a moment I mourned her, mourned us. But that woman and that marriage were gone now, and it was time I accepted that and started to rebuild my life without her in it. The day Rebecca moved out was surreal. I helped her pack up her things, dividing our possessions with a detached efficiency that belied the torrent of emotions beneath the surface. Watching her drive away, the car packed with suitcases and memories, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The house felt emptier without her, but also calmer. Like I could finally breathe again without the weight of her betrayal crushing my lungs. I knew I had a long road ahead of me. The divorce proceedings, learning to live alone, rediscovering who I was without her. But for the first time, I felt like I might actually make it to the other side. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work and self-improvement. I started going to the gym, channeling my anger and hurt into the punching bag and the weights until I was too exhausted to feel anything at all. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage, remembering how to laugh and joke and exist outside of my role as Rebecca's husband. I even started seeing a therapist at Sandy's, urging. It was uncomfortable at first, picking at the scabs of my failed marriage, but slowly, session by session, I began to heal. I began to understand that Rebecca's infidelity wasn't my fault, that there was nothing I could have done differently. I began to forgive myself for not seeing the signs, for being blind to her duplicity. About 2 months after our separation, I ran into Dave at the grocery store. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, his eyes widened in panic like a cornered animal. "John," he stammered, his voice shaking. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry, man. I never meant for any of this to happen." A few months ago, I would have punched him in the face. I would have screamed and raged and made a scene right there in the produce section. But now, looking at this broken shell of a man, I felt nothing but pity. "I know," I said simply, "but it did happen, Dave, and we all have to live with the consequences." He nodded miserably, staring down at his shoes. "Rebecca and I were not together anymore. It ended right after you found out. I couldn't live with the guilt, knowing what we'd done to you." I sighed, suddenly exhausted by the whole sordid affair. "I hope you've learned from this, Dave. I hope you never put another man through what you put me through." "I have," he said fervently. "Believe me, I have. I'm getting help, trying to be a better person, trying to make amends." "Good," I said, meaning it. "That's all any of us can do, I suppose. Try to be better than our worst mistakes." As I walked away, leaving Dave standing there among the apples and oranges, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I knew I would never forget what he and Rebecca had done, but I also knew I was ready to start letting it go, ready to move on, to build a new life, a better life. And as I stepped out into the sunlight, the crisp autumn breeze ruffling my hair, I smiled, because for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright, and I couldn't wait to see what it held. Life after divorce was a series of small victories and setbacks. Some days I woke up feeling lighter, unburdened by the weight of my broken marriage. Other days the anger and grief hit me anew, as fresh as the day I'd caught Rebecca in the act. But slowly, steadily, the good days began to outnumber the bad. About 6 months after our separation, I decided to take a solo trip to clear my head. I'd always wanted to go hiking in the mountains, to challenge myself physically and mentally, but Rebecca had never been the outdoorsy type. Now, with nothing tying me down, I packed a bag and headed for the trails. The first few days were grueling. My muscles ached, my lungs burned, and I questioned my sanity more than once. But as I climbed higher, the air growing thinner and the views more spectacular, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Up here, my problems seemed small, insignificant against the vast expanse of nature. On my 4th day, as I rested by a crystalline lake, I met her, Sarah. She was a fellow solo hiker, all lean muscle and sun-bronzed skin, with a smile that lit up her whole face. We struck up a conversation, swapping trail stories and marveling at the rugged beauty around us. As the sun began to set, Sarah invited me to share her campfire. Over a meal of rehydrated stew and instant coffee, we talked for hours about our lives, our dreams, our heartbreaks. I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't with anyone in years, not even Rebecca. When I mentioned my divorce, Sarah's eyes softened with understanding. "I've been there," she confided. "My ex-husband cheated on me with my sister. It's a special kind of betrayal, isn't it?" I nodded, feeling a kinship with this strong, resilient woman who had survived a pain so similar to my own. "How did you get through it?" I asked. She smiled ruefully. "Time, therapy, and a lot of screaming into the void. But mostly I had to learn to trust myself again, to believe that I was worthy of love and respect, even if he didn't think so." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I realized that was what I'd been missing, what I'd been searching for out here in the wilderness. A sense of self-worth, of inherent value not tied to another person's opinion of me. As the stars emerged overhead, Sarah and I said goodnight, exchanging numbers with a promise to keep in touch. And as I lay in my sleeping bag that night, listening to the soft sounds of the forest, I felt a flutter of excitement in my chest, not just for the connection with Sarah, but for the connection with myself. The rest of the trip passed in a blur of breathtaking vistas and quiet self-reflection. With each mile I hiked, each summit I reached, I felt pieces of myself slot back into place, pieces I hadn't even realized were missing. By the time I returned to civilization, my body was sore, but my soul was lighter than it had been in years. Over the next few months, Sarah and I met up regularly, for coffee, for hikes, for long conversations about life and love and healing. Slowly, tentatively, a spark began to grow between us. It wasn't the all-consuming inferno I'd felt with Rebecca, but a steady, warm glow, the kind that sustains rather than destroys. I knew I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, not yet. I still had work to do, wounds to heal, but for the first time since my divorce, I had hope, real, tangible hope, that I could love again, that I could trust again, and that hope was the greatest victory of all. Just when I thought I had my life back on track, the universe threw me a curveball. I was at a conference for work, presenting a project I'd poured my heart and soul into for months. The presentation went well, and I was riding high on the adrenaline of success when I saw her across the hotel lobby. Rebecca. She was on the arm of a man I didn't recognize, laughing at something he'd said. She looked good, happier and more carefree than I'd seen her in years. For a moment I was frozen, unsure whether to approach her or flee. Before I could decide, she spotted me. Her eyes widened, and she murmured something to her companion before making her way over to me. My heart pounded in my chest as she drew near, a million memories flashing through my mind. "John," she said softly, offering a tentative smile. "It's good to see you. You look well." I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. "Thanks. You too." I nodded toward the man she'd been with, who was watching us curiously. "New boyfriend?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Fiancé, actually. His name's Mark. We met a few months ago." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Fiancé. She was getting married again, while I was still picking up the pieces of the life she'd shattered. The unfairness of it all made me want to scream. But then I thought of Sarah, of the connection we'd been building. I thought of the peace I'd found on the hiking trail, the strength I'd discovered within myself. And I realized that Rebecca's new relationship had nothing to do with me. Her happiness or lack thereof was no longer my concern. "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. "I hope he makes you happy, Rebecca. I truly do." She blinked back tears, nodding. "Thank you, John. That means a lot." She hesitated, then added, "I know I hurt you deeply. I'll never forgive myself for that, but I'm glad to see you doing so well. You deserve all the happiness in the world." I smiled, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "We both do, Rebecca. We both do." As she walked away, back to her new life and her new love, I realized I was finally truly ready to let her go. Not because I'd forgotten what she did or because it didn't hurt anymore, but because I'd grown beyond it. I'd learned to find happiness and fulfillment within myself, not in another person. I thought of Sarah again, and my heart swelled with gratitude. She'd shown me that it was possible to connect, to care, to trust again after betrayal. She'd been a beacon of hope in my darkest days. I pulled out my phone and sent her a quick text. "Thinking of you. Dinner this weekend?" Her response came seconds later. "I'd love that. Can't wait to see you." As I slipped my phone back into my pocket, I felt a grin spread across my face. Life was full of surprises, some good, some bad, but I knew now that I was strong enough to handle whatever came my way. I had myself, I had my friends, and I had a future full of possibilities stretching out before me. And in that moment, that was more than enough. 1 year to the day after I discovered Rebecca's infidelity, I found myself back at Sandy's house for a very different kind of celebration, my divorce party. Sandy had insisted on throwing the bash to mark the end of my marriage and the beginning of my new life. As I mingled with friends old and new, sipping a beer and laughing at Sandy's increasingly wild antics, I marveled at how far I'd come. A year ago, I'd been a broken man, drowning in despair and betrayal. Now I was whole again, maybe not perfectly healed, but stronger in the broken places, like a bone that had knitted back together. Sarah was by my side, her hand warm in mine. We'd been taking things slow, both of us cautious after the heartbreak we'd endured. But with each passing day, I felt my trust in her, and in myself, growing stronger. She made me laugh, made me think, made me want to be the best version of myself. As the party wound down and the guests began to trickle out, Sandy pulled me aside, her eyes shining with pride and affection. "I'm so damn proud of you, John," she said fiercely. "You've been through hell this past year, but you never let it break you. You picked yourself up, dusted yourself off, and kept moving forward. That takes strength and courage and a whole lot of heart." I hugged her tightly, blinking back tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, Sandy. You were there for me when I needed you most. You're the best friend a guy could ask for." She grinned, punching me lightly on the arm. "Damn right I am, and don't you forget it." As Sarah and I said our goodbyes and headed out into the warm summer night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. It hadn't been easy. There had been countless moments of pain, of anger, of fear and doubt. But through it all, I'd learned some invaluable lessons. I learned that betrayal, as devastating as it is, doesn't have to define you. That healing is possible, even when it feels like your world has ended. That forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing, but about freeing yourself from the chains of bitterness and resentment. Most of all, I learned that I was stronger than I ever knew. That I had the power to choose my own path, to create my own happiness, to love and be loved again. As Sarah and I drove off into the night, the road stretching out before us full of infinite possibilities, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past year had been a crucible, a trial by fire that had tested me to my limits. But I had emerged from the flames tempered, refined, reforged. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But I also knew that I was ready for them, ready to embrace the future, come what may. Because in the end, that's all we can do. We take the hand we're dealt, the good and the bad, the joy and the pain. We learn from it, we grow from it, we keep putting one foot in front of the other, and we never ever give up on ourselves. Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.